Pat, the Uber critic McDonald, we are back talking about this is there's nostalgia like nostalgia.
Right.
We're taking a look at some older films, a lot of which I have not seen. This one I'd never even heard of, and I think you had suggested it because we were watching that Paramount Plus series, The Offer, which is about the
Correct.
making of The Godfather. And apparently, I've not caught up with it, unfortunately, in the 2 months
Right.
since you suggested this to me. But apparently, this movie we're talking about today, Little Fauss and Big Halsy, is mentioned in that movie, and that sparked an
Yeah.
inspiration to talk about the film. Had you seen this before?
I had not, and there's actually another reason that I did want to pursue this film. After seeing the mention in The Offer, I was like, Bob Redford made a motorcycle movie? Are you kidding me? And so that was number one. And then number two, I looked it up on Wikipedia or something. And one of the first things that was said, I think this is on IMDb, one of the first things it said was his son, Jamie, who I had met, considers this his favorite Robert Redford film. So
Wow.
his late son, Jamie, by the way, it's unfortunately he passed away a couple of years back.
I remember that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
because he was big involved in Sundance, right?
Well,
After or
he,
not Sundance, it was one of the charitable foundations.
right. He was sort of an activist
Hmm.
filmmaker, and I can't remember the subject of his film, but it played here at Siskel, and uh, and I interviewed him before he came in, so we got a chance to say hi and everything when I saw the film at Siskel. So I'm
It's
embarrassed I can't remember the name of the picture.
Well, it's unfortunately you hadn't seen this before you talked to him, because that would have been, question A number one is like, why is this
Exactly.
at your favorite movie of your dad's? I mean, his filmography is legendary. I'm not saying that there's no reason for it, because this is a hell of a movie, but it's just an odd choice.
It is a hell of a film, baby. That's the way you can sum it up in one sentence.
So,
So
I mean,
yeah.
we talked about The Candidate, which in an
Yeah.
alternate
Oh,
universe, I
that's
feel
right.
like this is the prequel to The Candidate.
It is.
Because at one point, Redford's character is talking to, I think it's Lauren Hutton's character or something like, "What do you get? What would you do if you got out of racing?" And he's like, "I don't know, politics."
Oh my God. And also I thought, well, this is perfect. He was running away from that father. You know? Melvin Douglas, he was running away from him.
Oh yeah,
And it makes sense. He ends up in some political activist office. That's where they find him in The Candidate. It
with
is the
just
prequel to
with
The
just a
Candidate.
yeah, with just a little tweaking to the backstory, because I think in that movie he was like the son of wealthy parents. But
Right.
what if that was all a lie, come up by this drifting con artist who who had a passion for
Well,
racing bikes?
also, you can twist it on its back and say he developed the big Halsey personality as a name change to escape his wealthy past
I like it.
because he was a drifter, a
Let's
shirtless drifter.
Well, and this is a perfect transition because you mentioned his back. That's one of the first things we see of him in this movie. He's shirtless, and we get a nice shot of his back, which has a long vertical scar, and it's been stitched up from a horrible incident. That we get sort of the style of the Joker from The Dark Knight. We get a couple of explanations for how he might have gotten
Yes,
those scars.
yes.
But yeah, set this movie up. Tell us, what is Little Fauss and Big Halsey, and why should people care about this
Well,
kind of obscure Redford film?
it's pretty easy to describe in the sense of it's about two motocross bike riders, meaning they race on dirt track motocross, which which back in the early 70s was sort of a background sport, like demolition derby or wrestling or some of them went to mainstream, some of them faded away, some of them became other things. I would say motocross became the X Games, the stunts and everything. There's probably motorcycle racing somewhere in the US, and similar to what Redford and Michael Pollard was doing. He
Oh
was,
yeah,
of course, Little Faust, and Redford was Big Halsey. But that's basically it. Two motocross guys coming together, Redford more of a drifter, Pollard more of an up and coming person, and Redford sort of cons his family and Little Fauss to become his second, and he could ride under his name, and et cetera, to the big race. Yada 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 to the big race.
And then, of course, in all these types of movies, there's a girl that comes
Yes,
between
there's a
them,
girl.
played
It's
by
always,
Lauren Hutton. Is it fair to say model turned actress? I think that was her story.
yes, yes,
Um,
and also was that her film debut? Because if it was one of the most auspicious debuts in history.
and you're not just saying that because she's introduced running completely naked down
Completely
down
naked
a runway or
for
something.
no reason whatsoever except to show her naked form. You want to,
You know,
that's what gets into the drive-ins, baby. That's the Roger Corman for me. It was sort of like a Shakespeare Roger Corman movie. I like to.
I could see that. I mean, she's reading Naked Lunch
Oh
during
yes,
their trips together. This whole thing has this sort of an alt reality Burroughs Hunter Thompson
right.
feel to it. It's right in line with that. And I was thinking, back in the 70s, we've talked about movies involving motorcycles before. We talked about that Evil Knievel movie, which is a slightly different thing, but there did seem to be a fascination with bike and motorcycle culture back in the day. I kind of miss it. I'm getting nostalgic for that because it's just such a crazy, subculture of colorful characters, at least as they're portrayed in the movies. But
Yes,
she hooks up with these two guys and just kind of follows them around on the road for, I guess, lack of anything better to do. I'll confess, there's a lot of mumbling, a lot of kind of soft talking, a lot of quick soft talking and mumbling. I didn't
right.
pick up, there was a lot that I feel like I lost. So I think a second viewing is in order. But
Interesting.
I get the feeling that we don't really find out much about, kind of like Redford's character. We don't find out much where she came from, or how she ended up on that that stretch of road running into the race naked.
Running completely nude into a group of motocross riders.
Right. Well,
It was pre-race, correct? It was
well, yeah, and she ducks into uh Faust's pickup truck
yeah.
to cover herself, and the spectators are sort of off like 100 feet away, and Faust kind of he's sort of nominates himself to kind of cautiously walk up to the truck and be like, what's going on, lady?
Well, actually, Halsey makes him go over there.
Oh, did he? Okay, you put it up to him.
She's reading actually The Soft Machine by Burroughs. When she puts the paper back in her back pocket, it says by the author of Naked Lunch.
Oh, was that it? Okay.
Yeah, well, it's so subtle, but I had to freeze frame that because I said, wasn't she reading The Soft Machine? And then I noticed it said by the author of. So they were
Okay,
just promoting the book on the back cover.
I see. Well,
A
it's the
small
same.
point.
Yes, but this it's a very interesting setup because it sort of opens with a race, and Lil Foss is, I don't know how old he's supposed to be. I don't know how old Michael Pollard was when he made this movie. He looked anywhere between like 18 and 32.
It's
Um,
it. That's funny. It's true.
he's got one of those faces, so he could be. I get the feeling he was like an older guy, kind of living at home with his parents while he tried to get this motorcycle dream off the ground, and they were
Yeah.
supportive of him. They sort of they had their own kind of like food truck business, which the old man had expanded into offering wood porta potties that they could
That
bring
was very
places.
funny. Very funny.
And there's this, the sort of the opening race, uh, or thereabouts. Halsey's bike gets totaled, and he, can't go on anymore. And Faust is kind of clumsy. He's got the passion and the drive, but not the talent to really make it on the circuit.
Right.
So they make this
And
sort of a
not the
deal.
profile either. The
Right.
Redford character has a greater profile, but he's
It's a
also
notorious
suspended,
one.
correct?
Yes, he was
Yeah, it's very.
suspended. And so this is
Yeah,
also a way that he could, go on the circuit, as it were, using Foss's bike and his name
his name.
to rack up the glory. It's a fascinating premise. One of the things I was not expecting was a bit of, I'll call it filmmaking innovation, because I hadn't really seen this before. It's probably, there's a dozen instances I'm sure I'm not aware of, but at one point, mom and dad Foss are sitting down, having a nice picnic outside. It's a beautiful summer day, and their
Right.
son hasn't showed up, and they've got food's sitting out and there's flies crawling all over like the lettuce and the tomato of the what would be his sandwich, and you can hear the humming, and the buzzing of the flies
Right.
transitions into the humming of the kid and this drifter they've picked up tearing through the field after they've just gotten into trouble with a sheep farmer.
And the sheep farmer's trying to shoot him.
Right. Very reminiscent of the Back to the Future escape with Marty when he
Very
travels
good.
back in time.
Yes.
But no, the buzzing of the flies transforming into the humming of the motorcycles, we believe it because they're so far away.
Right.
And then as it gets closer, because the adults are like, what? Those are some
I'm not
strange sounding flies.
I'm not sure if that's bad symbolism or just like you said, some sort of cinematic transition that was kind of clever. Because easily you could say the flies are Big Halsy coming into Little Fauss's life, and he's, his maniacal nature. I mean, he doesn't give a damn about anybody or anything. So you have Redford playing against type, actually, and is a true anti-hero, not just the charming Butch Cassidy type anti-hero. This is more of an asshole,
Very
to put
much
it bluntly.
So. Yeah,
I mean, he's a total a-hole.
and he's a complete user, but he's got, I don't know if it's because I told my wife, I'm like, I don't go that way, but I've got like a man crush on Robert Redford because he was, in 1970. I mean, we see him shirtless. He's like a guy in a Marvel film now. He's like got to be shirtless for 20% of the performance, right?
I'd say he went full Matthew McConaughey in this film.
There you go. In another time, he would have been in Magic Mike. But, but he's just he's charismatic in his own way.
Yep.
It's a great experience of being part of the audience to see the manipulation of others, but also to see how the people he's manipulating don't quite see it, or
Right.
they see it just enough that they think they're not going to be completely swindled by this guy, but he is just taking people out left and right. There's the photographer at that opening race who he ends up Halsey ends up running up this big tab. He's like, yeah, I need a couple of bucks to buy a beer. Goes into this bar and says, yeah, put on that guy's tab. Plus I'll take, 4 beers and 2 steaks. And then he's got this girlfriend who I think he's alternately referred to as his wife in at least one exchange or something. He has a habit of sneaking out on women in inconvenient situations, barefoot, half naked the next morning.
Right.
Help me out with this, Pat. I feel like it's implied that the photographer, Halsey, and that girl had a threesome, and he left the 2 of them in bed.
That's correct.
That's so correct. I read that right. Okay.
Yeah, the actress's name is Linda Gay Scott, and she was also the actress that Redford, if he's looking back on his filmography, he would not let this scene be played, but he's completely sexually harassing her in front of all the other motorcycle jockeys. I mean, obviously touching her inappropriately. You don't see it on camera, but you're just like, God, take it easy, dude.
Was that the same? Are we talking about 2 different people? Because I feel like I know you're talking about the one who he was groping like on camera. She was like, you've got your hand up my shirt or whatever.
Well, let's distinguish it. Little Fauss sleeps with her towards the end.
Yeah, that's not a different character than the one from the very beginning. Yeah, with they were both they were both blonde.
Sexist turn.
No, it's
felt up.
But it's
I thought it was the same person, but I can't remember.
No, they're 2 different people because he leaves this woman.
So there's 3 women that are in there: Lauren Hutton, Linda Gay Scott, and one other.
Yes.
Okay.
Plus the 2 people that, as he puts it, go AC/DC later in the film. The other.
But I thought that was again Linda Gay Scott and the other blonde.
In fairness, it's dark in that scene and it's hard to tell who the hell is fighting over this guy. But yeah,
it's never going to get an award from #MeToo. Let me put it that way.
No,
never.
in fact, it'd probably be considered Exhibit A for the crimes of the
For the
20th
cancel
century. And
culture, yes.
right. Um, but no,
Okay. Do you
I
know that
wasn't.
Bob is sporting an earring in this?
I
Did you
did
notice
notice
that?
that.
Wasn't that crazy? That was pretty radical back then.
A lot of things are pretty radical. I still am stuck on this whole idea of the threesome with the male photographer, Robert Redford, and then this woman, especially because later when Redford or Halsey has that threesome, I know where people are like, what the hell movie are you talking about? But uh when he has the threesome with the two girls and he sneaks out and Faust was
Yes.
sleeping in the truck overnight while this
Yes.
other bang bang was going on in the house. Um, he's like, yeah, I gotta get out of here. It's bad news. Um, once it's cool, twice it's
Vice is
queer.
queer. Yeah.
So I, it just seems a little bit
Happy
hypocritical because,
Pride.
right, exactly. But I just feel like because that whole thing with the camera guy and the girl in the first stretch of the film, I just have a feeling that he's done this. This isn't his first rodeo, as it were. So a
Or
little
after
bit of
the three,
hypocrisy there.
I think the threesome with the photographer was designed so he could rip the guy off
Oh
the
yeah,
next morning because he took his camera, he took his wallet, I think. I mean, and he just bam, see you later, alligators.
but I guess my question is, how far did he go in this con?
Yeah, yeah.
But
Um,
so the movie is about a lot more than this. But what Pat and I are talking about is just some of the flavor to give a sense of what kind of a character
right,
this Redford is playing here. A pretty scummy guy, but undeniably charismatic. You'd kind of want
right,
to you'd on the surface you'd kind of want to be him unless you spent 10 minutes like after he
right.
goes home. What's he actually like?
And I think that was kind of the point of the movie. We have this very handsome, charismatic guy who pretty much gets everything he wants versus little Faust, who's living in a backwater town with old parents and no future. And so, he gets conned by the conner and we move on. Yeah, but that's a great description that he's very like appealing unless you have to spend 10 minutes with him.
Yeah. And Little Faust is unlike a lot of characters that I've seen in this kind of role. We've seen hundreds of movies where there's a cool
Right,
guy and kind of a nerdy guy, and
right, right,
usually there's like a journey of self-discovery, and the nerdy guy just discovers that sometimes it's not so cool to be cool. We get a little bit of that in here, but
right.
Pollard, I don't know if it's in the script or in his performance, there's a lot going on under the surface there. I alternately feel like he's experiencing a lot of things for the first time, but also that he's a lot wiser beyond his years than he might be letting on.
You're talking about Little Faust.
Yeah.
I couldn't really get a read on his character. I'm like, is he on the spectrum? You know,
As they
Eh,
wouldn't have known that term back then, but yeah.
well, yeah, of course. But the thing with Michael Pollard, the actor, and I think reasonably I can say I know him well from his role in Bonnie and Clyde, and I know him well from Little Fauss and Big Halsey, but nothing else.
And so you're telling me you've never seen Sleepaway Camp 3, Teenage
No,
Wasteland?
no, I have not
No?
seen
Okay,
it.
I'll have to lend you
Sorry.
the Blu-ray sometime.
So yes, Pollard. I think as a character actor, he was simply playing himself characteristically. you know, this is kind of the vague actor he is. We're not sure if he's mentally all there, but we do know that he has a heart of gold, and he wants to be a motocross guy, and he's going to do his damnedest to get there.
Right.
And yeah,
Well, because at one point later in the film, I know we're kind of jumping all around, but
yeah, yeah.
the dynamic duo of Faust and Halsey, they split up, and Rita, the Lauren Hutton character, goes off with Halsey because it's Robert Redford,
Yeah,
frankly.
she's not
They
picking Little Faust.
Right. They have their own kind of issues, but
Yeah,
Little Faust, he's going off and pursuing his own journey and ends up sleeping with the one of the girls from earlier in the
Linda Gay
film.
Scott,
Right, Linda Gay
the
Scott.
woman. Yeah,
and he
which
does
was a
the
very odd scene.
well, when he sneaks out in the morning, he can't quite pull it off because she, catches him and berates him, but he kind of stands up for himself. He's like anti-charming. She's like, why do you guys always run out on, girls like me or something, or on me? And he says, don't you guys me, I'm me.
Right.
I thought that was a really great line. And I can't remember if it was before or after, but at some point he gets into a confrontation with Halsey, and I got this line written down somewhere.
Is it the friendship line?
Yeah, he says, and it's just the delivery. He says, "We're not friends, man. I don't even fucking like you." I'm like,
Well, no, he goes, if that's friendship, then I'm aghast.
that was a separate, yeah, that was sort of the preamble to that.
Okay.
And then
I
Faust comes
was
back
like,
with that other line. Yeah,
that's why I called it, biker Shakespeare, because they have lines like that in there.
it's such a pearl clutching moment. You can't tell if he's being sincere and he just doesn't know
Exactly.
how to express himself or what. But yeah, that line by Pollard, that delivery at least, suggests to me that there's something else going on there. Now, I don't know if it's because I've watched way too many movies or if we've seen way too much in the news about like kind of shrimpy put down guys going off on large groups of people. But there's a scene involving a card game late in the picture
Right.
where Halsey is kind of holding court in his place, and Rita announces, "Hey, you've got a visitor." And Little Fauss comes in, and he's standing in the corner, and he's wearing this like almost like an army jacket, and those little glasses. His hair, he's very dark and very sinister looking. I was just waiting for him to pull out a gun and just like unload on
Blow
his
the way,
former friend.
blow the room away.
For like the entire 5 minutes, I was convinced that that was how this was going to go down. And at one
Wow.
point, I was glad that it didn't happen, and I was also kind of annoyed that I was like, "Well, why am I, why am I thinking these thoughts?"
Well, one of the interesting things about the background in The Offer, the miniseries, it's about Albert Ruddy, or Al Ruddy, who produced this film and went on to produce The Godfather. That was his next project after Little Fauss and Big Halsey.
Wow.
Is that I believe Ruddy was kind of one of those pitchmen who said, "Here's the trend right now, so let's get a big star, let's get a soundtrack, and let's get in on that trend." Obviously, Easy Rider had come out, a couple years before or a year before, and of course, throughout the '60s, Roger Corman was making bike movies all over the place with Peter Fonda and Jack Nicholson, and there, and even the director of this picture, we're talking like 1940s studio exec. Uh, the director of
Sid Fury.
this picture, Sid Fury, um, did Leather Boys with the great Rita Tushingham. An immature teenager marries a young biker but becomes disenchanted with the realities of working class marriage and her husband's relationship with his best friend. Now, was that Little Faust and Big Halsey 7 years earlier?
It
This
sounds
guy,
like it. Now I want to see that movie. Now,
yeah, I know, I do too.
what was
Especially with Rita Tushingham. Come on, that's one of the best actresses' name ever.
it's
She
also the
must
name
have
of
had a
a.
good one.
It's like
She
it's an Austin Powers James
yes, I
Bond
know.
character
It's a
knockoff.
fembot. Oh, Rita Tushingham, behave. By
Oh my
Austin
gosh.
Powers, ladies and gentlemen.
That movie's 25 this year.
Oh, Christ.
Yeah, I know.
Man, oh
Feel
man,
your
Shevitz. I'm so
arteries
fucking
harden.
old.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, so I'm thinking that Ruddy just pitched this. There's a scene where he pitches it to Redford in The Offer. The guy playing Redford, not bad. And so you get an idea what kind of producer Ruddy is. He's like, here it is. We'll get it done. Boom. And suddenly you're on set 6 months later playing a motocross guy. He was doing a downhill racer at the same time, I read too. So
Man, again, it's just
completely
something about
different films.
racing and motor competitions in the 70s or the 60s and 70s.
Well, it's interesting to see where Bob Redford wanted to take his image because obviously Butch Cassidy was the big the Sundance Kid. That was the big breakthrough because it made him more than a pretty face. He was the sly guy. He was the sidekick. He was actually playing a character. And now somebody comes to him and said, "Hey, Easy Rider Bob, we got Little Fauss and Big Halsy. Come on, man." "Oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea." I have to mention actually two the two actors playing the parents, Mom Fauss and Seeley Fauss. Noel Beery Jr., who was the son of a very famous, old-timey studio actor, Noel Beery, went on to do the Rockford Files most famously as Rockford's father. And then Lucille Benson, who played Mom Fauss, she has that very distinct voice. All through the 70s, when I was watching television, I knew when she would be on something because she had that distinct motherly voice and that look. And it looked like Little Fauss and Big Halsy was a very early role for her. So she must have woke up one morning and say, "I have the voice, I have the look, I'm going to become a character actor," and worked all the way to her death in the 80s.
And they were great. I mean,
oh, they were great.
I think they work really well as these sort of supporting background characters that we come back to every once in a while, to the point where later in the film, when it turns out the dad had passed away at some point during this, this kind of split up, I was genuinely bummed out, not because I felt bad for the character necessarily, but because I wouldn't get to see that, actor again. Because the parents really do play well off each other, and they're so, goofy, but not in a contrived way. I believe that that these people really could exist.
Well, Big Halsey said something really good. Another Shakespearean line having to do with the dad's death. "I'm most shocked to hear of his untimely domain."
Is this?
I was like stopping the movie just to laugh because I knew I couldn't. There's a lot of exposition in this, a lot of long sequences where the scene is set too long. We get it. He's in a field with sheep. He's going to be shooting at them. They could have tightened a lot of that stuff, but that was again an influence from Easy Rider, because Easy Rider was simply scenes and long takes of nothing happening but something happening.
Right.
So
I think that all of that is great to set up the contrast. This is what it's kind of like Luke Skywalker on Tatooine, like really illustrating why the hell this farm kid wants to get out of there and go see the big sights. So I think.
So you're saying Little Fauss and Big Halsy, Star Wars, is that?
Hey, Lucas could have watched this. Been like, "Oh, it's really good."
Now, if I put this in space.
Yeah. See? People should.
Now, that would have made a different film if Carrie Fisher would have came out the same way as Law and Hutton.
Well, especially because she would have been like 9 years old during that scene. But Carrie Fisher was only 19 when she did Star Wars.
Yeah. I just the strange, sudden appearance of Lauren Hutton, completely frontal, nothing hiding, sirs and madams.
It kind of reminds me of, it wasn't quite that explicit because I think it was PG, but Daryl Hannah, when she makes her splash in Splash,
right,
showing up at the Statue of Liberty in her, non-mermaid form.
I think that would have been an R in these days.
Oh,
they're very careful about these days. It used to be a PG could have nudity in it. No more. If there is a flash, maybe you can get away with it. But I'm talking if you're doing like a full stand-up shot like that, that's the automatic R.
It's just like Jaws.
And I don't think
that's a PG movie that has nudity in the opening shot and a lot of violence, and
Which one?
Jaws.
Oh yeah.
It's
pretty explicit nudity in that too. You're looking. Spielberg liked that underwater camera, that one. So.
You mentioned the music earlier.
Yeah.
I nearly fell off the couch when I heard. I'm like, is that Johnny Cash? That's not like a knockoff. That's actually Johnny Cash singing a song called Little Fauss and Big Halsy.
And Big Halsy.
Yeah, he does all the music for this movie.
Well, he did a version of Bob Dylan's "Wanted Man" that became one of his standards. That was first in that movie, I would assume.
Man,
I
is.
know it blew my mind. It was. I said, this is the perfect easy rider setup. They have the motocross bikes, they have the anti-heroes, and they have the soundtrack. They've got all their financial buckets in a row for Big Fauss
How did
and
this?
Little Halsy.
Do you
No,
know
I'm
how this
sorry.
movie did? Speaking of
Got mixed it
financials,
up. Yeah, I don't think it did anything at the box office, but I'd have to check.
yeah, we have been talking about this motorcycle movie for a while now, not mentioning really at all the motorcycle like racing itself. I think there's some pretty spectacular stuff going on here with the, the mounted cameras and the kind of action photography that's going on. There's that scene where they're all like the sidecar scene where the people are like riding horizontal. I think the last time I saw something like that was
Side
one of
hacks.
yeah, like the Mission Impossible. They did that in one of those movies a few years ago. But there's the other bit where Little Fauss is
And Big
driving.
Halsey.
Nice. He's
Sorry.
driving up. It's almost a 90-degree dirt wall towards the end during the qualifying race. And I'm like, I swear I'd have to go back and watch it again, but I feel like we see Michael J. Pollard like put on the helmet and then go just do that. I don't know if they did a switch for a stuntman, but it was just
Well,
exciting.
and again, this was in the Evil Knievel days, so there was a lot of country. You know, the days before the country was sort of had all entertainment. You know, everybody had the same entertainment. You know, these dirt bike, dirt track, stock car, demolition derby stuff that they all made toys about and became famous later, and Evil Knievel jump cars at county fairs, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. This is, this was motocross's turn to be exploited for art.
Well, I found out this weekend I'm going out of town and there may actually be some kind of a motocross style event as an option on the
Oh,
table. And I'm 100% there after watching this movie.
oh, absolutely. You must go. So, I wanted to mention too. You said about box office. He Redford initially said it's the best script of any film I've ever done. But he was, however, somewhat less than thrilled with the film when it did not live up to expectations at the box office, so it didn't do well. However, when the film premiered on television around the time Redford was shooting All the President's Men, he confided to Alan J. Bakula, the producer of All the President's Men, that he resented its television broadcast because, after years of successful films, he was less than enthusiastic about Little Fauss and Big Housing. So,
That's and that's it's disappointing. I guess I can understand it from one aspect, but it's like if you love the script, is his beef that the movie didn't turn out like the script, or the fact that he loved the script, believed in the movie, and it didn't go anywhere, so now he's retroactively saying, "Nah, I never really liked it."
well, he, there was here's another thing about it. Pakula told Redford that the film showcases one of his best performances that he's ever given, stating that his performance in it was the last unself-conscious revelation of the actor's real-life edge.
Hmm.
Right, because he was kind of candy coated in the rest of his roles, I guess.
Or candidate coded, as it were.
Yes, I mean that really did change it. That film significantly changed his image too, because he was doing action films like Downhill Racer and Big Halsey, and then suddenly he's in the serious film The Candidate. So now he's a serious character actor. 3 Days of the Condor followed All the President's Men. So yeah, if you see the trajectory, it makes sense, all of it. So
Yeah, I guess
especially trying to switch his persona from pretty boy.
it's just kind of disappointing because, as you'd mentioned, I had never heard of this movie before, and I feel like it's not perfect and it's definitely rough around the edges. And if you were trying to really re-release this date today, you'd need like 2 minutes worth of trigger warnings. Um, but
Exactly.
I would love to see this at a retrospective somewhere, like at the music box or someplace, because I think it deserves more acclaim.
it does deserve another view and perspective. But again, you, if you show it the Musicography, for example, you'd have to have a poster warning there's sexual harassment, there's exploitative nudity, there's threesomes with a photographer. I mean, if Ty West made this, he'd be a genius today.
There you go. Ty West remake Little Fauss and Big Halsey.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
my
you
that's my
just
plea.
can't bring it back. You know, Grace Slick was supposed to play Rita in Nebraska. Isn't that interesting?
Really?
Yeah.
That is, and that's, models and supermodels get knocked all the time for, trying to act and stuff. But, Lauren Hutton, the only other thing I think I remember her being in was a movie called Once Bitten, which came out in 1986 or 87, the
She,
Jim Carrey vampire comedy,
oh,
which I thought
wow.
she was great in. And I think she's pretty great
I think she's a
in
good
this.
actor.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's really good in this. She took a role that could have been just a sideline role and created something so intriguing that you're just the fact that she's reading the William Burroughs novel whenever they're on the road. I just thought that was hilarious because it was like the outside world is still coming in, even though Little Fauss and Big Halsey are outside the grid or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. And I think there's, she ends up pregnant in the movie, and that's a really nice revelation to Little Faust. I mean, it's not a good revelation, but the way that we find out is, she kind of gets out of the car and she turns, and it's like the bump is like really close in
Right.
frame, and he's very small, kind of in the background. And he's like, whoa. But I feel like that whole kind of situation, it at least offered the promise of some kind of hope that they might make it out of there as some kind of a bizarre little family. But she never fell into kind of like disillusion as to who he was and frankly who she was. Um, and
Well,
also
didn't
like
one of the characters say that, once a whore, always a whore? Or what
I
was
think
that
I think that
reference
I
to?
think that was no, that was
Big
Halsey,
Halsey?
yes. Well, she left him, I think, in that last scene. She took the
Oh,
kid and packed up and went back
right,
to her parents' house. But
right,
earlier on, I should have set this up before. There is that moment where you really believe that they could make something of themselves. And
right.
I feel like I don't know if I feel like it's a contrivance of the screenplay that she, packed up and left, but it just seemed like that was kind of out of nowhere.
Well, I think maybe they wanted to set it up for the big confrontation at the end. But also, the there's a reference to abortion too, that like Halsey couldn't come up with the 200 or 300 bucks that was necessary to take care of the pregnancy. But so that's why he was shrugging his shoulders and said, "I guess I'm a dad now,"
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
though he was not going to change his stripes just because he was a dad.
Well, I mean, and that's evidenced by the fact that there's kind of a nice, again, not nice, but a startling kind of reveal of we see him racing around a track and winning, and he hops off the bike, and immediately Rita is being ushered into an ambulance to go give birth. There
All
was no
right,
setup to that conversation. It's not like,
right,
hey, baby, wait here. I got to win this race and then we'll go to the
right,
hospital. We don't
right,
need that because we see the after effect of it.
right. Which
And
is
it's,
kind of chilling. I had to say, what about bowler hat Bob? Remember, he just appears in like a bowler, like a London bowler at the end.
that, yes. And I think Kubrick ripped that off for Clockwork Orange.
Yeah,
No,
probably. Hey, dude, nobody saw big little Faust and Big Halsey except the obsessive cinephiles of the day, which was Kubrick and Lucas.
I think there's a case to be made there. But yeah, he shows up. He shows
Definitely.
up at the end of the road, like with this bowler hat and this like a pink scarf and like glasses, and he's just like, "Here I am." I'm like, "What?"
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but it's kind of perfect in its own way. I do want to mention as we kind of
yeah,
wrap things up,
yep.
the director of this film made one
Yes,
of
I'm glad
my
you're saying that. Go ahead.
he made one of my favorite like guilty pleasure movies, sort of. I don't really have guilty pleasures, but if I did, this would be on the list. Iron Eagle in 1986. And also Superman 4, The Quest for Peace in
Oh, he did the worst.
1987.
He did the worst best Superman.
If you ask my 5-year-old who watched Superman's 1 through 4 this year, Superman
Yes.
4 is the best Superman.
Well, I mean, again, it's one of those things that was dismissed at the time, but really, three is hard to watch. Three is very hard to watch.
Especially
One
that
and
opening.
two,
Yeah.
they go down legend. I haven't seen four since it's come out, so that's been close to 40 years. So I have to revisit him. Now that I know Cindy J. Fury, let me just read a little of his other notable and maybe familiar films. The Ipcris File with Michael Caine in the 60s. The Naked Runner, which was always on late night, and we were always disappointed that it wasn't truly naked.
I was going to say to star Lauren Hutton.
Yes, exactly. AKA Gable and Lombard, one of the greatest bombs of the 70s. You know, they were bringing back, it was the relationship between Clark Gable and Carol Lombard, and just a tremendous bomb. The Boys in Company C, a cult film about Vietnam. And of course, you mentioned Superman Quest for Peace, but I have to finish this. The fact that Bob Redford and Rodney Dangerfield were both directed by Mr. Sidney J. Fury, Ladybugs. Sid, you magnificent bastard!
I didn't go that far into his filmography. He
Sydney!
directed Ladybugs?
Ladybugs. That's the last film I recognize on his IMDb list. So that was it for him. Once he did the Rodney film, he was done in this town. Sorry, I can't get you anything but a TV movie on Lifetime.
Wow. Well, hey, since we're talking about Sidney J. Fury, I need to stop and do a shameless plug, not for myself.
Okay.
Not really, but this is like 900,000 plus page book. The Canon Film Guide Volume 2 just came out.
Wow.
And it covers the years 1985 to 1987 of the films of Canon Film Group.
Good Lord.
And it covers Superman 4, The Quest for Peace.
Now, yes, they did that. They did that.
Now, Austin Trunick is a maniac. He's the guy who wrote that book and the first volume. He's been, working for years on this follow-up, and it just came out a couple weeks ago. And yours truly is mentioned in the thank yous, along with my friend Mark Crotchet.
That's somewhat of a pluck, I guess.
Yes, but I'm just saying, if you're wondering what the hell happened with Superman 4, check out that book. But yeah, talk about an eclectic career.
Is he a friend of yours?
We know each other, sort of. Not Sidney Fury, of course, but no.
The guy who wrote the Canon book. Cool.
Yeah. But I gotta say, and as I was kind of mentioning, Sidney Fury had such an eclectic career.
Yeah.
He's like the Coen brothers. You can't quite pin him down.
I think he was a jobber. I think he just went from one job to another. He didn't care what he was going to shoot it the way he was going to shoot it. There's no real, you can't apply any kind of style to him, obviously, because of the differences of the films. He was a set him up and put him down, baby.
Yeah. Well, I would say we need more of those. I'm going to say it. I think we need more of those today because everything is, franchises.
If you look at the filmographies of the guy, like the director of like an Adam Sandler film or something in that middle part of commercial films, there's guys who do the Sidney Fury thing. They hop from one to another. Where they're completely different subjects. They might go from a comedy to a robot drama to that sort of thing. So there are guys who are jobbers that are making good coin going from film to film because no fancy filmmaker will touch them.
I just like that when you're listing genres.
Nobody wants to do a Sandler movie. If they're what?
Well, I just love that when you're listing genres, you said like comedies, robot dramas.
That's what we got now, man. Oh, by the way, what I wanted to mention something. Oh, Ms. Marvel. Are you covering that?
No, I'm taking I'll do the highlight version because I gotta go. But the I'm taking a year-long moratorium
All
on
right.
superhero movies and TV shows. So I will maybe
Well,
catch up with it next
it's
year.
unfortunate that Ms. Marble is on the, because I'm not watching him either, but I needed an extra thing to review this week on the radio. So I thought, well, I've heard a big buzz about that. So I watched the 3 episodes and I was very impressed.
Yeah.
So well done. I mean,
Oh,
there are parallels to the partition of Pakistan and India around the colonization period, where the Brits gave up their colonization. There's things about immigration in it, of course, but there's also things about, even this bizarre worship of superheroes we're currently under. And I get why you're doing your moratorium. I get it. I mean, I applaud you for it, quite frankly, because to me, it's become a dreary exercise.
and that's why I just got tired of talking about how much I don't like these things. So I need to take a step back,
I,
get some perspective, and see what things look like
no,
next year.
that's a real good idea, man. A real good idea.
Well, I think it was a really good idea to talk about this movie, Pat. So
Yes.
I should mention, if people have, and this is not a plug, but it's just a coincidence. If people have Paramount Plus, you can watch.
Yes,
This is on that streaming service. And
that's
you can probably
correct.
rent it other places.
And
But
probably believe it's on there because of its mention in the offer.
I would love that if someone was like, "Hey, we should just get all the movies that are referenced in the offer and put them up
Oh
on our
yeah,
platform."
I'm almost positive that's the case because it's so prominent in like the second episode, I think. The problem with the offer, and I'll say this very quickly, is that it can't it's too long a miniseries to hold its premise. That's all.
Hmm. How many episodes
And
is it?
I'm just at the part where they're filming it, and I got kind of tired, so I have to get back to it.
How many episodes is it?
It's 10, and they're all an hour apiece.
Oh my gosh.
I know, I know, man.
You can just
It's
watch
like
all 3 Godfathers in that time. And
it's like the Queen's Gambit. I mean, everybody was talking about it. I finally watched it, and by about hour 7, I'm like, are they going to do anything different in this goddamn thing?
I can't speak to that one either, but yeah, I got a lot of catching up to do.
All right, brother.
Pat, thank you so much for recommending this. We'll be back next month talking about, I think
Will
we're
we
going to
be
be
doing
talking about
Shaft?
Shaft. Yes.
Yes.
You're damn
Don't
straight.
shut your mouth.
I will, because I'm ending the show. But no, thanks very much, sir. I'll catch you later, dude.
Cheers.
Bye.